Good evening. This right here is Mr. John Durham. He is, of course, the special counsel who was assigned to investigate the alleged spying that was done against President Trump's campaign back in the year 2016. And after remaining, you can say, relatively quiet for the better part of the last 2.5 years, well, John Durham's investigation appears to be ramping up big time. In fact, yesterday was the first day of the jury trial against Mr. Michael Sussman, who is the former Clinton campaign lawyer currently being charged for lying to the FBI. And this trial, well, it's beginning to reveal some of the details surrounding what was really happening inside of the FBI during the period of time when President Trump's campaign was being spied on, and also at the very same time that the national media across this entire country was in unison beating the drumbeat of Russian collusion. Let's go through some of these spiciest developments together that came out of this trial, starting with the one that took place actually before the trial began. Because you see, even before the jury, the lawyers, and the prosecutors made their way inside the courtroom, well, the Clinton campaign, the DNC, Fusion GPS, which is the opposition research firm, as well as Perkins Coie, which is the law firm, they were all working together, well, in tandem at least, to withhold or at least heavily redact the communications that they had with one another. And the reason that they gave the judge as to why they should be able to withhold those documents is because allegedly those documents contained attorney-client communications as well as other privileged material, meaning that they were asking the judge in the case to allow them to hide their internal communications because of attorney-client privilege. However, as a response to that request, John Durham filed a motion in which he alerted the judge of fines against the Clinton campaign as well as the DNC that they were forced to pay after the Federal Elections Commission conducted an investigation and concluded that the Clinton campaign and the DNC violated federal election laws. Here's specifically what John Durham wrote in his filing, quote, "Specifically, the Federal Elections Commission found probable cause to believe that the DNC and the Clinton campaign improperly reported their payments to Perkins Coie for Fusion GPS's opposition research as legal and compliance consulting." Meaning, in plain English, that during the election cycle, the Clinton campaign and the DNC were giving money to their law firm, Perkins Coie, who was then giving that money to Fusion GPS in order to conduct opposition party research against Donald Trump, including by creating that Trump-Russia dossier. However, on their forms to the Elections Commission, they were listing those particular payments as simply being for legal services, which the Federal Elections Commission found to be false and issued a fine against both the Clinton campaign and the DNC. However, now, even after that fine was issued, the Clinton campaign, the DNC, Perkins Coie, and Fusion GPS, they are making the argument to the judge that all the documents that are related to this case, well, they fall under the umbrella of attorney-client privilege, and therefore they can be withheld, which is quite frankly a very cool argument. And if the judge actually bought it, well, then that would mean that a person can theoretically pay their lawyer to do something either illegal or unethical, and then if they're caught, well, they can say that all the related communications, the emails, the text messages, and all the documents, well, those are privileged and cannot be used in a court of law. It's almost like a legal loophole of client privilege. However, the judge in the case did not buy the DNC's argument, and instead, well, he sided with John Durham. Specifically, the judge is allowing John Durham as well as his team to procure all of the unredacted versions of all those supposedly privileged documents, which, just as an aside, also means that all those documents may ultimately be made available to the common plebe like you and me. Furthermore, besides compelling the production of all the unredacted documents, the judge in the case also ordered Fusion GPS, which is again the firm that was paid to create the Trump-Russia dossier, to hand over an additional 1,500 documents as well as several dozen emails to the Durham team, which I'm sure will cast a new light on how this whole Trump-Russia collusion allegation actually began. Regardless, setting aside all this behind-the-scenes jockeying that was happening before the case actually began, let's get back to the actual trial. And there are 3 things that I believe are worth mentioning. The first is the identity of the presiding judge in the case, who, for your reference, is Judge Christopher Cooper, who was appointed to the bench by Barack Obama. And what's interesting to note in regards to Judge Cooper is that, for one, he acknowledged that he and Mr. Michael Sussman, the defendant, were professional acquaintances while at the Justice Department back in the 1990s. Furthermore, besides knowing the defendant, Judge Cooper's wife is actually an attorney who represents, among many other clients, Miss Lisa Page. And if that name sounds familiar to you, well, that's likely because Miss Lisa Page, she is the former FBI attorney who was having an affair with Mr. Peter Strzok, and eventually their text messages were leaked to the public, and in those messages, they were discussing an insurance policy in case Trump ever got elected. And now, the lawyer for Lisa Page is the wife of the judge who is presiding over the John Durham case. You can make of that what you will. then the second point of interest that's come out of the case thus far is the fact that it took less than 1 day for the FBI to figure out that the Trump-Russia Alpha Bank claims were actually false. Specifically, during the very first day of the trial, FBI agent Scott Hellman, he took to the stand to give his testimony. Now, for your reference, Scott Hellman was actually part of the team inside of the FBI who were tasked with examining the white papers and examining the data on the thumb drives that were given to the FBI by Mr. Michael Sussman, claiming that there was some Trump-Russia connection and the evidence was on this thumb drive and in this white paper. However, as I mentioned just a moment ago, on the very first day of the trial, this FBI agent told the court that, quote, he and another agent took less than a day to ascertain that the information did not support the allegations that Trump's business and Russia's Alpha Bank had a secret connection. And then furthermore, he had some, you can say, choice words regarding the people who were behind these alleged documents. Here's specifically what he said, quote, I think the person who drafted the main white paper was suffering from a mental disability. Why would a presidential candidate put their own name on a supposedly secret domain name? Furthermore, if you recall, when Mr. Michael Sussman actually handed over these white papers and these thumb drives to the FBI, he claimed that he was not working on behalf of any clients and that rather he was just a concerned citizen who came across something that he thought that the FBI would be interested in. However, it looks like that the FBI were not even buying this version of events internally, because internally, well, the FBI agents, quote, described the primary paper as, quote, the DNC paper. And so that is rather unambiguous. Now, the third point of interest that has come out of this case thus far is the fact that Mr. Rodney Joffe, who is the tech executive who compiled this anti-Trump data and then handed it to the lawyer who then handed it to the FBI, well, he was actually working himself as a confidential informant for the FBI, although he has now since been fired. Let me just repeat that. The tech executive, whose company had a government contract to provide domain services for the president's office, who then used that access to compile these sketchy claims against President Trump, well, he himself was working as a confidential informant for the FBI, which then raises a very natural question. If he came across genuine information that linked the Trump organization to Russia, why would he hand it to a lawyer to then hand it to the FBI? Because if he was a confidential informant for the FBI, as we now know him to be, wouldn't it be easier to just hand it to the FBI yourself? But that's not what he did. And it looks like for that, and for this mess generally, he was fired. Specifically, according to one of the prosecutors on John Durham's team, quote, the termination was because of how Joffe was involved with a scheme to compile information on the alleged connection between Trump's business and a Russian bank. Now, everything that we discussed only came from the first day of the trial, and the trial is expected to last about 2 weeks, so expect a lot more details to be revealed in the case, since in the coming days, we'll see testimonies from James Baker, who is the FBI general counsel, Mark Elias, who is the Clinton campaign's general counsel, among many, many other people. Now, of course, to be frank, this trial is not as interesting and as exciting as, let's say, the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, but has a lot more further-reaching consequences. Because think about it. If the FBI can target a presidential candidate without any consequence, well, you can be fairly sure that they can target you and me as well. Now, if you'd like to read about any of these developments that we went through together for yourself, I'll throw all of them into the description box below this video so you can check them out and go deeper into everything we discussed. And then furthermore, because this case is so complex and has so many different moving parts, our team here at the Epoch Times, we actually created an infographic which simplifies the Michael Sussman case into one clear timeline of events. It's a phenomenal overview, and I'll throw the link to that into the description box as well so you can check it out for yourself. And all I ask in return is that if you haven't already, take a super quick moment to smash that like button so this video can be shared out to ever more people via the YouTube algorithm.